call Derek. I'm grateful to be anywhere clean today. Those of you who just came up here and picked up books, those are your road maps to the journey of self-discovery that you will be traveling through for the rest of your life. We hope you stay here. I told Steve that I was going to introduce him for 45 minutes, so he only had to talk for about 10 minutes. But I'm not going to do that. About 4 years ago, I heard his speaker tape, and I had just recently picked a new sponsor. And when I called him to ask him if he would come and speak at our convention this year, I told him that story, that when I heard his tape, if I was still looking for a sponsor, he would have been it. And he said, "So are you looking for a sponsor?" I said, "If I ever am, I'll call you, but what I'm looking for is a convention speaker." And he agreed to come out here and share with us on this week. And the 10th convention is kind of a special convention for us, and I believe that we have kind of a special speaker here tonight. And it's an honor and a privilege to have gotten to know this man over the last day or so and spend some time together, getting to know each other. I feel as though I've known him for a long time, but I'm looking forward to getting to know him a whole lot better. I give you Steve T. from Bath, Maine.
I'm Steve, recovering addict. Thanks, Derek. And thank you all. I really wanted to thank Derek and Kim. They opened their house up to me, got here and found that couch downstairs there, and I was home. I always get real nervous up here at first, so you'll just have to bear with me. I want to thank you all for the hospitality. Everybody's been real friendly. It's, of course, you do get a few people give you the "who the fuck are you" look. But you know what? I used to dish them out myself. So I don't take it too personal these days. There was a time. I have to do, I think, a couple of disclaimers here. They call them. First of all, what you hear tonight is my own experience. I do not represent Narcotics Anonymous. I'm just a recovering addict. So if you don't like what you're hearing tonight, come to another meeting. I usually say, if you don't like what you hear tonight, just remember I'm talking about me and not you. Then again, if you really don't like what I have to say, maybe I am talking about you. It's much better to give a resentment than to receive one. But it's not my intention to hurt anybody's feelings, believe me. But inadvertently on my path of recovery, sometimes the truth hurts. But you know what? You get over it and learn to deal with it and learn to grow from it. And my path has been a lot about growth, and you hear all kinds of speakers, and I got to tell you, my focus is the steps and the principles. And you'll hear a lot of other types of speakers, but this is just my thing. And some of you have already heard me, and sorry you're going to hear the same old stuff, but because the story hasn't changed. I grow, I evolve, and my story evolves, but basically it's the same. And my intent here is really just to reach one person. If I can just bring just a little bit of clarity to one person here, you made my day. That's what it's about. So take what you want and leave the rest. It is cold up here, man. I got to tell you, I still swear because I don't do it in my house because I got kids. So this is the only place I get to swear. Other than when I'm driving in my car, I still have attitude, a driving attitude. And so that's the only other place I swear. So if you don't like it, sorry. get over it. Talk to your sponsor, write about it. Okay. I first came to Narcotics Anonymous in 1982. I was skin and bones. I was a street person. I was not even remotely, you would not even recognize me from when I crawled off the streets. I was skin and bones, about 135 pounds, and that was a good day. Actually, a good day was probably 140. And I had all kinds of sores and abscesses from shooting just junk dope off the streets and crap, you know. And just, I was in rough shape. And I had a gun. I was on the north shore of the island of Oahu in Hawaii. And I had a gun. And I was contemplating using it on myself. And in the end, I shot the wall and remember just in a moment of desperation, because I was in rough shape, and I remember saying, God help me, and I got this immediate answer in my head that said, help yourself. And I was like, wow. And I was like, you know, I definitely got a message, go get help. And so, you know, I did. I went downtown in Honolulu and I called all these places. It was Friday morning. And I had stolen a bag of dimes from somebody. And I was calling all these places, and they're all saying, come on Monday. And this is Friday. And I'm like, you know, fuck your Monday, man. I need help now. And finally, this one place said, okay, come tomorrow morning and don't use. So I showed up at this hospital. And basically, they wouldn't take me because I didn't have insurance. But they gave me 3 phone numbers. They gave me a number of the Mission downtown Honolulu, so I'd have a place to sleep. They gave me a number of Manpower. They got Manpower here, daily jobs, you know, in case you want to make money on by the day. And they gave me a number from a guy from Narcotics Anonymous. And now, I had never heard of Narcotics Anonymous. And I just thought to myself, man, there must be some good dope there. I'll keep that number. I did. I was like, what the? And so I got downtown Honolulu and Manpower was closed. It was Saturday. The Mission was closed. The place smelled like pee anyway. I didn't want to go in there. And so I'm standing on the corner of Hotel and Bishop, which is red light zone downtown. And for no apparent reason, I called this guy. And I had that moment of like, oh shit. He said hello. And now what do I say? And I just said, my name is Steve, and I shoot dope, and I can't stop. And this guy's voice got real quiet, and he goes, where are you? And I told him, and he goes, don't move. I'll be right there. And I'll tell you, I still get the chills from that. I just got him. It's like that was my first impression of Narcotics Anonymous, and that's actually, in that time, that was a combination of H&I and PI working together, because they had put their number in at this hospital as a resource for people, you know, who couldn't afford help. And this guy came and got me and picked me up, took me to breakfast, and dropped me off at Detox. And I kicked there, and I went into a program, and then what happened is I went out of the program. And I'm just going to, you know, shorten this story. I went in and out for about 2.5 years. I went through 8 rehabs and detoxes and psych unit. I was going into Looney Tune land. And finally, I did a geographic, and I woke up once again back in the islands, and I was underneath somebody's catamaran, and I was sucked up again, all skinny and full of sores again, no job, no hope, no money, no dope, no hope, all that good stuff. And it was just like I had been to enough meetings. The longest I'd stayed clean in that 2.5 years was a couple of months, about 3 months. And I knew there was another way, but I just never did anything anybody said around here. And so what happened is I woke up, and it was one of those days where I remember the first thing I always do is pull out my stash and do the morning hello. And I remember looking at it, and my hand went like this and through it. And then I felt the force of gravity It was like addiction. The disease of addiction was like gravity pulling me to turn around and look where I threw it. You ever done that? And it was like it took every atom in my body. And I feel like that was my moment where I was all alone. I had to help myself, be willing to help myself. And I just had to just go through that one moment of not looking back. And I didn't look back. I remember it was like, I felt like I was lead in my veins, and I finally turned around. I took one step in the other direction, and then it was like all the weight let go, and I was just, poof, I was gone. And that was the first day clean. That was June 16th of 84. And I've been clean. And I went through another rehab, and I got a certain degree of willingness, let's put it that way. And I went through this program, and I got out, and I stayed in the islands there, and then about a year and a half clean, I wasn't working much of a program. I went to Los Angeles area, and I finally made 2 years clean. And I got a job at a place there where there's a lot of recovering addicts. And it became very obvious I had no recovery. It's funny when you're surrounded by a lot of recovery, then you know. I really got to see it. And I remember this guy from the islands came up and saw me, and he was surprised as hell I was alive and still clean. He goes, "So Stephen, how's your life now that you've been clean for a couple of years, for 2 years?" And I had to think to myself, well, basically, I was still unemployable. I took jobs I didn't like. I didn't take criticism well. I never worked the steps, never done any service. Still love to hustle women and hustle money from people. They called me Angry Steve, the walk-in resentment. My favorite words were, "Fuck you," and "get out of my face," with lip and attitude and all that. And I was real good at making people leave. And so I looked at this guy, and he asked me how I'm doing. I looked at him, and I said, "I'm doing great." He looked at me and smiled and said, "Stephen, you'll go far in this program." And I said, "Really, why?" And he said, "Because you have so far to go." I didn't like that necessarily, but I knew it rang of truth. And I looked at him and I said, "Why am I such an asshole?" And he goes, "You're not an asshole, Steve. You just act like one." And I said, "Why do I do that?" And he said, "To keep people away." And I said, "Why do I do that?" And he said, "So you don't get hurt." And everything kind of slowed down for a second. Before I could shut my mouth, I looked at him and said, "Well, how do I change that?" And he got this big smile on his face. And he goes, "Man, I thought you'd never ask." And that was the day my recovery actually began. Because at that moment, I got willing. And I remember I said, "Well, what do we do?" And he looked at me and he said, "We work the steps." And I just went, "Oh, shit." I said, "Steps are for people with learning disabilities." He goes, "Yeah." I had a real problem receiving new information, man. And so I said, "Well, how are the steps going to help?" And he said, "The steps will help you change." And I said, "What do I have to change?" He said, "You only have to change 3 things: how you think, your attitude, and your behavior." And I said, "Yeah, well, how's it going to help me do that?" And he says, "Very simple. You work step 1, 2, and 3, you get right with the God. You work 4, 5, 6, and 7, you get right with you. You work 8 and 9, you get right with others. You work 10, 11, and 12, and you keep right with yourself and your God and others." It's very simple. And I needed that little overview of the steps, because all I'd heard is like bits and pieces, and it all sounded confusing and, what's the word? Formidable. I don't want to. Everybody was complaining about the 4th step and the 9th step and all that shit, and they just wanted to work the 1st and the 12th. And And it all sounded confusing, but when he laid it out like that, it made it look, oh, now I see. And he said, we backed up, and he said the first 3 steps would allow me to survive my feelings. 4 and 5 would show me how I think. The 6th step would show me the attitudes that my thinking produced, described as character defects. And the 7th step would show me that if you let an attitude go long enough, you're going to act on it. And those are the behaviors that I had to change in the 7th step. And that was where I had to do my work. And let me remind you, this is just the way it was explained to me. If it makes no sense to you, fine. And but this worked for me. And so what happened is I began to work the steps. And the way it was explained to me is he handed me a pad, a pen, and a dictionary. And I had to do all this looking up shit and reading the text and first I had to do a journal for 30 days and not miss a day, and if I missed a day, I had to start the whole thing over again, and we did the journal for 30 days, and it was a feelings journal. He wanted he'd know about my emotional content. He did not know what he didn't want to know what I thought, he wanted to know how I felt. And that way we were going to learn how to define patterns, certain emotional patterns that I have. And so I did that, and then first I asked him, why do I have to write this out? Why can't I just tell you what's going on? And he looked at me and he said, because, Stephen, if you take all the information that's yakking in your head and you write it down on paper, guess what? It's not in your head anymore. And that would make room for new information. And you know what? That really worked for me. That, the more I wrote what was going on, I got quiet inside. And I was able to receive, go to meetings, and I could actually hear and feel what people were saying. I started to feel a little more contact. I wasn't so self-centered. And so he had me write on the first step. And this is just the basic way it was explained to me. The first step and the principle that went with it was the principle of truth. And the opposite of truth is the lie. And in my admission of powerlessness and unmanageability, that is the beginning of the principle of truth. And he wanted to know a lot about what I felt, and something happened. I remember he asked me how I felt. I think it was one of the first times he ever asked me how I felt. And it was one of those days where I woke up and I was feeling real vulnerable. And he goes, "So Stephen, how you feeling today?" And it hit me like a rock in the chest. And I remember suddenly I zapped back and felt like I was 7 years old, and I was watching cartoons. And when I was 7, I was watching cartoons. This guy came up and backhanded me and said, because I was laughing at the cartoons, and he backhanded me and said, "Stop being silly." And then I cried because he hit me, because I was only about 7, and then he hit me again, and he said, "Stop being a crybaby. Men don't cry." And then something inside of me got a little bit rebellious, and I gave him a little attitude, and he gave me another backhand. He said, "Go to your room. You're bad, you're wrong, you're stupid. After all we've done for you, this is how you repay us." I can't tell you how many times I heard that line. And, I'll tell you what, I got a whole lot of messages from that. The first message I got is, if I tell you how I feel, I'm going to get hurt. That was the first message I got. And the second message I got is, my feelings are bad, and I better not let you know how I feel. And it also gave me a message that your feelings are much more important than mine. And then I began what I call this hideous behavior called people-pleasing and approval-seeking. Because the only way I got an okay about who I was by doing something for somebody else. And I'll tell you what, I did it, but a rage started inside of me. A little ball of fire and rage and pain. And, I was treated with a lot of violence. And, my childhood in a nutshell is like, my mom was an addict, her mom was an addict. I was taken away from her when I was a year old. I went through 3 different family segments with this one family. And by the age of 7, I was in my 3rd family. And this, at 2, they kept me in the attic. At 4, sexual abuse began. At 6, I was in the 3rd family, and this guy, they kept me in the cellar. And one time I said something inappropriate. They jumped on my back, and this guy started biting me and making animal sounds. It just like freaked me right out of this world. I wanted to leave. I did not want to be here. And I remember crawling in the corner after this guy bit me once, and I was praying they'd shoot me, just put me out of my misery. And I got molested by this guy, this psychiatrist guy they tried to hook me up with. They thought he was a friend of the family, and he molested me. And he got my face, and he whispered 1 inch from my face, and he said, "If you ever tell anybody, I'll kill you." And my reaction to that was I went home and I grabbed a steak knife out of the kitchen drawer and I stabbed all the furniture in the house. I just went nuts. And then I tweaked, I went into this little world for a while, and I don't remember much between 7 and 11 until I started experimenting. And I went into drugs and criminal behavior and hanging around other people who were all messed up and troublemakers in school. I got kicked out of school. They sent me to a psych unit they sent me to a mental institution after I stabbed all the furniture. Justifiably, I'd say. But I could never say what happened because it was always my fault. That's the way I felt. And I didn't know how to stand up for myself. So anyway, all of this flashes in my mind's eye in a split second. My sponsor says, "How do you feel?" And I'm looking at him going, "Fine." And he goes, "No, how do you feel?" And I'd say, "Good." And finally he says, "Name a human emotion." And I had to learn how to say happy, sad, angry, lonely. I had to begin to label my feelings and label who I was. And he was the first person that I ever really told the truth about who I felt, how I felt at one moment. You know what I mean? It was like he was the person that broke the ice, and I started telling him who I really was and how I was really feeling, and that made a huge difference. That was like a launching platform for me. So that was the principle of truth, and the problem with that was I started to tell the truth, and then it started in motion, the change process, because it was like pulling the cork off a pressure cooker, and finally I started telling him everything, and stuff started coming up uninvited, and I started feeling all this weirdness and all this crazy feelings, and I started feeling real insecure and a lot of panic. And then we got into the second step, and for me, the principle was the principle of faith. And it was like I had to look, it's like when I feel fear, it's like standing in a fork in the road. One road says, practice the art of creative diversion. I can get out of that fear by picking a fight, lusting on this lady, or hustling money from so-and-so, or whatever. There are many diversion tactics. Sexual diversions was a big one for me. And and the other road says, tell the truth, name the feeling, because the funny thing about the principle of truth is, if I name a feeling, suddenly it's not as big a problem for me. And so what happened is I had to name the feeling. I had to say I was afraid, and say I don't know why if I don't know why, or say why I think I'm afraid if I do, and go to the right people with it too, because sometimes I would go to the wrong people who could give a shit. We're all at different levels of recovery in this room, you know what I mean? And some people, they could like, yes, so, and, I did that a few times, and I'm like, and so finally I started gravitating towards the people who had real recovery, who understood change and all the uncomfortable things that come along with it, and the awkwardness of it. Because, I always wanted to sound so smooth and slick, but man, when you're in change and you're in fear and in pain, it's not pretty, and it's not smooth, and it's, So I learned how to do that, go to the right people. And we moved into the third step, and he introduced me to the principle of humility. And, I didn't like the third step because I kept thinking there was this, religious thing coming with it. And this is in the beginning, and I told my sponsor, I said, why do I have to believe in God? Because that's what I thought you had to do if you do this third step thing. And he says, you don't have to believe in God. All you need to do is practice spiritual principles. If you practice spiritual principles, you will walk a spiritual way of life. Your life will change, your relationships will change, and you will find a higher power of your own. And I like the option. And so what happened is, I remember for me, the feeling of humility was to finally drop my guard, and my focus initially was to quit pointing the finger, because I was into blaming people for my condition. And so what happened is, I had the principle of truth and faith and humility, and what that gave me was courage. And the initial courage is to survive my feelings and just stay clean no matter what. And that gave me a platform to live. From there, I could stay clean no matter what. But I'll tell you something, I didn't come here to just survive my feelings. I came here to flourish. Neither lead, follow, or get out of my way. Because, I want the whole package here. I didn't want to... I swear, I did not come here to find some kind of mediocre existence. I did not want to just keep drugs, at bay and be afraid of using and being afraid of seeing it or any of that. And I didn't want to walk around in rage, because I had a lot of anger and a lot of pain inside of me. And I was afraid. I had a lot of fear. And I didn't want to live with that and just survive it. I I wanted to change it. And so I got to the point where I took all that, and it was all about drop all that bullshit and just start writing about who I am. And what happened is I wrote out my 4-step, when at this time there was no 4-step guide. And so I just wrote out an autobiography as complete as I could, and I went to my sponsor, and I showed it to him. And I remember looking at him and feeling a little bit of apprehension. And I looked at him and I said, why do I have to read this to you? Why do I have to tell you about this? And he looked at me and said, because, Stephen, it's very difficult to spot self-deception by yourself. And I really did need a second opinion on the way my life was and how I viewed my existence. And so I remember reading it out. And in my 4th and 5th, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about my thinking and my feelings and attitudes. I learned I had 2 major patterns in my life. The first pattern I had initially was how I create pain in my life to justify using. And the next pattern I found in my life, after the obsession to use was gone, it was how I create pain in my life to justify isolating, to justify bad-mouthing people, pushing people away, that whole arrogant, fear-based character assassination path of, how I push people away. And that's all about the disease and fear and all that unresolved shit. And I found I had a couple of main issues. I had abandonment, rejection, and betrayal issues. And interesting thing I discovered was that I had become most guilty of it. My thought is that it happened so much in my life that I began to anticipate it in every relationship coming down the pike. So what my philosophy is, it's much better to give a resentment than to receive one, so fuck you first. I abandon, reject, and betray you so it doesn't hurt when you leave. Because I know you're going to leave. That's what my head tells me. And so I got really tired of all that. It's like I got ready to change. And then I discovered my number 1 character defect. My number 1 character defect is I am not true to myself. My feelings come up and I stuff them down and then blame you for it. And an example of my addiction process is I woke up one morning along the path here and felt real sad and lonely and insecure one morning. And I remember this guy came up to me and he said, so, hey Steve, how you doing this morning? And I looked at him and sad and lonely and insecure came right here and said, fine. Because where I come from, you do not tell the homeboys, hey man, I'm a little sad and lonely and insecure. How about a hug? I thought that was really hokey. And so he says, okay, see you later. And he walks away. And you know something, there's a law in life. Feelings must come up and out. And if they don't, they go down and in. and then they come out all right, sideways, expressed as inappropriate behavior down the road on some innocent bystander. Or if you're into my path, which was self-loathing, you turn it in on yourself and just hate who you are, and then make somebody pay for it. I had a whole package there that justified, how I treated people and how I treated myself. And so this is actually the disease of addiction in action. That people like us have tremendous emotional depth and content, and it takes a tremendous mental effort to keep those feelings down. And that mental effort is called obsession, the first part of addiction. And it's all the unresolved. It's my grandfather in my head saying, don't be a crybaby, don't be angry, don't be selfish, don't be silly. It's all those, voices in my head telling me how to act. And because I have not let go of them or dealt with them, they're still in control. And so my head starts to spin, and that's mental obsession. And then I get what's called attitude, and it's like, then I start talking out of my neck going, you're fucking ugly. I say things to insult you, so you'll leave. And then what? If you don't leave, then I hurt you, I act out. I'll do something to really make you leave. And then what? Then I'm an addict, all alone, in pain, and I'm in a world of trouble. And so what happened is I caught myself and I ran to my sponsor and I said, whoa, how did I get there? And we backed it all the way up to the first lie of the day. When my friend said, how are you doing, Steve? And I told him that lie, that was the launching platform for the disease of addiction. And that propelled me right into that whole world there. And so what happens is I had to go back to that guy and say, you know what? This morning when I said I was fine, I was not. And what happened is I was able to communicate to that guy, and it broke the ice. And I started to let people know who I was and how I felt, even when I was uncomfortable and feeling weird and fragile and sensitive. And what happened is I was met with love and understanding. And that began to heal the fear and allow me to let go of it and begin to move through stuff. And I started to feel a little free. And I found out that all my character defects were a product of this unwillingness or inability to express who I was. If I don't express my fear, it becomes, if I stuff it, it becomes paranoia and suspicion, and then it's a defect. But fear itself is an opportunity for change. It's an opportunity for growth. It's like losing emotional gravity is what I call it when I feel fear. And I'm in between point A and point B. And I have let go of A, and I do not have a hold of point B. And I don't know where I'm going. And that's when I need to practice all the principles to survive that process. And so I began to practice all this stuff, and I found out that I had a lot of sexual obsession in my head, and I found out that sexual feelings are very normal and natural and healthy, but if I stuff it, it becomes lust issues, and then it's a defect. I started to see that my anger is a reaction to pain. It tells me where I'm sensitive. And if I let people know what's going on with me, what hurts my feelings and what doesn't, then it's a healthy thing. But if I stuff it, it becomes resentment, hostility, misplaced, and then it becomes a character defect. So you see what I'm saying? It was like all my problems were originating in this thing of me stuffing my feelings for fear of what you'll think. And so I began to tell the truth when I felt like I wanted to lie. I began to practice faith when I felt fear. I began to practice a little humility when I felt angry. And something happened. My thinking started to change, my attitude started to change, and my behavior started to change. The people I was associating with started to change. The conversations I was having with people got more depth. And I started to learn how to have a real laugh. I never laughed before I got here. I used to tell people, my laugh, when I was using, used to sound in between a cough and a puke, That was me laughing, and it's usually pointed at somebody. I laughed only when I made fun of somebody, because I was a a little shit, I was an evil little, my whole thing was to shame people because that's the way I was treated. And so I began to practice these principles, and you know what, I'm not here to tell you it was as simple as ABC. It was awkward, uncomfortable, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I went through a lot of changes and uncomfortable moments, but I stayed with it. I learned how to breathe when I got into that tension place and being scared and thinking I'm going nowhere, and hang out with the healthy people who remind me it's okay, just breathe, hang with it, you'll be okay, it's just part of the process. And I started to trust people, and magically other people started to trust me. And it was nice to go to a meeting and actually share something truthful instead of trying to look for recognition, or trying to talk big shit when I really didn't know anything. And things started to change. And so I took all that and moved into the 8th and 9th, and heard about amends, and I did not, I thought the word amend meant I'm sorry. Well, my attitude about it was that, fuck you, man, I ain't sorry about shit. Initially that's how I felt. And but my sponsor said the word amend does not mean I'm sorry, it means to change. The word amend means to change. And what am I changing? I'm changing relationships with people in the past. Because I was unable or unwilling to state what my needs were, I just took what I wanted. And there was emotional ripoff, monetary ripoff, dope ripoff. There was all kinds of ripoffs. And my sponsor said, make a list and we'll talk about it. And so I did what he said. I made a list. He made me write a little bit about what happened with each one, and I showed it to him, and he goes, okay, which one's the worst one? And I said, oh, this guy, my grandfather, the one that bit me in the back and threw me against walls. He broke things over my head, called me stupid. And when I saw him, my vision of him is he's in front of me, and between us is his knuckles. I swear, he was like he punched me so many times. 3, no. It's like, he hit me a lot. And more than that, it was the way he treated me, I was less than a human being. And, I slept in a cellar that had no heat. When I think back now, it's like, what was he thinking? He's nuts. And anyway, my last year of using, I got into artwork, drawing signatures on checks. And I found his checkbook when I ran out of cocaine one night and helped myself, feeling very smug about it because I knew it would kill him when he found out. And so I said to my sponsor, yeah, I gotta pay him back. And he goes, yeah, you gotta pay him back his money, but that's not what this is about. You gotta make some peace with this guy, because I'll tell you what, that anger is eating you up inside. And you know what, he was right. That rage and anger was killing me. It used to feel so good to get that burning rage and feel so justified. It was no longer there anymore. It was like tearing me up. It made me feel terrible. And so I had to write a letter to this guy. That was my instructions from my sponsor. Write a letter to your grandfather and own your side of the street only. It was not, I did this because you did that. It was, this is what happened, this is how I felt, and this is what I did. This I will do no more. This is what happened, this is what I did, this is how I felt, and here's your money back. And so I went down this whole list of all these things where we had, some pretty painful interactions. And so I wrote it all out, and before I called, I go to my sponsor, I share everything with him, and we agreed it was good. So I called somebody in the family, and this is like years later, and I hadn't seen them in about 4 or 5 years. They had disowned me because of that little forgery adventure. And so I had to call around in the family to find this guy, and I called his daughter, my aunt, so to speak, and she said he had died. And something really important happened when I heard that. I went into a little world, man. I remember hanging up the phone, and it was like this hollow click. And all of a sudden it was like all this rage that I felt for him disappeared like a puff of smoke and was replaced by this unbelievably repulsive feeling of affection for him. And I was like, ugh. I was like, there was a reflex to want to stuff it. But I have learned to be true to myself. I have to let my feelings up and out. Just like it was one of those spiritual moments. I just let it out, and it was like all stuff up, and all I remember is I see this vision of my grandfather in front of me, and I'm like, it's like I could see him, close my eyes and see him as clear as day, and it was a strange vision of him, and I was looking at him as if I had never known him, and I was seeing all the lines on his face and the things that shaped his life, and I saw this sad, lonely, vicious human being who somebody must have kicked the living shit out of when he was a kid, and he was doing to me what was done to him. And all of a sudden, things started to slow down a little bit, and I started to get this feeling like maybe I'm the victim of another victim. And what happened is, all of a sudden, I felt this thing in my heart, and it was the principle of forgiveness. And I had to forgive this guy, because at that moment, I discovered why we have the 8th and 9th step. I discovered I had become just like him. There was a vicious little side of my heart that was wounded, and it justified hurting everybody that ever tried to get close to me. And all of a sudden I started to feel that, oh shit. It's like, I thought I was doing so well. So I let go, and I remember, forgiving him, and then this welling up and some release and tears and all that kind of stuff, and like a ton of weight lifted off my shoulders, and I suddenly felt free, and for no apparent reason, other than there was a spiritual healing that went on right at that moment. And I'd like to tell you that was it and it was over, but it wasn't. I'm going to follow this story through because I always forget. What happened is that was when I was 3 years clean, and 5 years later, when I was 8 years clean, something happened. I remember waking up one morning, because see, I did this whole thing of forgiving all the people in my life, because the other issue that came up right after my grandfather was all the sexual abuse stuff. And I'll tell you what, you want to feel some rage inside of me about being molested and abused. I'll tell you what, there was homicidal tendencies inside of me about that one. And so all these feelings came up, and they all got kind of put on hold. I did a prayer thing where I just let go of them and forgive them and move on. And it helped to a certain extent until when I was 8 years clean, all of a sudden I woke up one morning and I felt myself bristle with hostility and rage for no apparent reason. It just woke up, and that's the way I felt. And I knew I was in trouble. I was in Denver at the time, and I was heading over to Boulder, and I remember in this old Chevy of mine, I looked up, and in my head, I saw this vision of an ice-cold Beck's beer sweating on my dash, and it's like, beer, who drinks fucking beer? It's like, but it looked really good in my head. It wasn't there, but I knew I was in trouble. And so I go to my friend's house, and I'm all messed up. I'm all fucked up, man. I'm telling you, I said something inappropriate, and my friends got insulted, and they, I had to leave, and they weren't very understanding at all. And boy, they were a lesson, man. You sure find out who your friends are when you screw up around here, don't you? I thought they were my best friends, and to this day, they will never let that go. And that was like years and years ago. They badmouthed me still. Only at this, see, I went back to them, made my amends to them, and they didn't want to accept it. So, as far as I'm concerned, now it's their thing. But boy, that was brutal, though. Anyway, what happened is the thing that I have is a really good network of support. And so when I felt like nobody there knew me as well, I called back to Hawaii, where I have some friends that have a lot of clean time and a lot of recovery. And I called my friend Tom, and I said, I'm in trouble. And he and I have real similar childhoods, abusive stuff that was there, and he said, you need to come here. So he goes, I had, just drop what you're doing, pack your bags, and get over here, and I got some friends that will help you. And I did something that maybe is not typical in Narcotics Anonymous, but we did what we call emotional release work. And what happened is I had a place inside of me, a little boy that got molested when he was 4 years old by this girl, and it forever screwed him up with relationships. And I'm heterosexual, so it wasn't like I could go to the other side and just ignore it. It was like I had to deal with it because I treated women bad, in relationships. I abandoned every one of them. And I had a lot of rage and a lot of stuff. There was these wounds inside, and yes, it's real nice to forgive those people, but I'm walking around with all this pain. And there was, when I was old and 4 years old, I was never able to verbalize what I felt, and I needed to do that. And what happened is I did. I was told to make a sound. If I could make a sound to say how I felt when I was a little kid, being thrown against walls and been going through all this shit, what would it be? And at first I couldn't make a sound, and then a sound came out. And it sounded like somebody was over on the other side of the room, and this piercing, blood-curdling scream came. And it was just like, whoa. It made my hair stand on end, and it was like the real me finally got to say something. And just to speak this outrage, this pain, this unbelievable pain that propelled me into this world of loneliness and darkness. And it went on for a while, and then I went through the anger stage and the grief stage and all this stuff, and got all these feelings out. And it came out the other side, and then I did closure with these people. I was a bunch of role playing and stuff, but I did closure so that, that was the end. And what happened is I took all this stuff of unresolved pain, because I'll tell you what, the unresolved pain sits right here and keeps anybody from getting close. Because when I get close, when I get in relationships, you get what's called vulnerability. You get vulnerable with somebody you love. And what happens is I would open up, and all of a sudden that stuff would start to come up, and I'd stuff it down because it scared me, because it was so powerful. And so what I would do is I would duck out of the relationship. I would find some way to exit, justify leaving. And when I finally went in and got that stuff out of the way, my whole life began to change. Then I found the value of the 10th step, because then I found, once all the emotional garbage is gone, then I found I had all this head full of yakking in my head, that all that obsessive thinking that was designed to keep those feelings down, I no longer need it. I don't need the attitude. I don't need all that shit. So I began to write, to journal, to get it out, and learn how to communicate, and learn how to have healthy interaction, healthy relationships, and unconditional relationships with no hidden agendas with women, no hidden agendas with men or anything. And good things started to happen. And the final closure on my grandfather on that whole scene was about 5 years ago. I went back to the East Coast. I was living in Hawaii, and I went back to the East Coast, and I went to my grandfather's grave, and see, my perception of who he was and how he affected my life had changed dramatically. My desire to grow out of what he did to me ended up teaching me a whole lot once I stopped resisting the emotional part of it. So in fact, on a spiritual level, my grandfather became my teacher. He was my teacher. He forced me to find a level of understanding that is far beyond anything I would have pursued normally. He forced me to find an unconditional love, a level of understanding for human life, human nature, human behavior that I never would have pursued had he not been in my life. So in fact, it's a good thing. That's where it is now. And it also, all of this allowed me to understand other people to a huge degree. And I began to attract people in my life, have really healthy relationships, real healthy sponsor relationships, sponsee relationships. I've been with my same sponsor now for about 13 years. And he's my best friend, man. I love my sponsor. Chuck is the man. And I spend one weekend out of the year with him. He lives in California. I live in Maine. But we communicate regularly, and I go to see him once a year, and we do our step work. I just did my 6th and 7th step, and it's been a powerful journey. Anyway, the final closure on my grandfather is I went to his grave, and I wrote this letter of thank you. And it was a real powerful thing. And I did something special for him. There's a part of me that's like a closet musician. Okay, we all got our talents. One of mine is musical instruments. I play only by myself. If you're in the same room, I can feel you listening, and it interrupts me. So I was sitting on our dock once, blowing off riffs on a flute in this bay up in Maine, and where we have this cottage, and it was echoing all around this cove and around these hills, and it sounded pretty cool. And my grandfather came down, and he said, "That sounds very spiritual. I really like that." And it was one of the few times I really liked my grandfather. And so I took out my flute, and I played this little epitaph over his grave. It was like a farewell epitaph, and it was like really important for me to do closure with him. And I remember playing this melody, and it was so quiet. You could have heard a pin drop. It was like raining real lightly. And I remember hitting the last note and feeling my soul whisper, "Thank you." And it was like that was the end. And, it's like a smile came to my face, and it was like my grandfather and I are now at peace. And that is really the 9th step in action. And, I'm getting chills, man. And it ain't about being cold either. That was one of the most powerful healings, and I did a lot of work on all the sexual abuse stuff, and I processed that. And the 10th step really allows me to keep current, because I'm amazed at people that I hear they work the steps and then they stop for a long time. I can't do that, man. My life is like an unending series of changes, and if I don't stay current with it, I get in trouble real quick. And so I don't write every day. I do write periodically, and I communicate all the time what's going on with somebody. And I learned how to say things promptly, as they say in the 10th step. I had a couple of experiences that I'm going to share real quick. I used to let myself be a doormat. This whole thing about, learning how to be true to myself, working the first 7 steps, and then working through the 8th and 9th, and then finally getting to the 10th, I started to come into who I really was. And I was the kind of person where if you said something and I felt insulted, I'd give you that little smile and then turn around and walk away and go, "You fuck." Bad mouth you big time, go bad mouth you to other people, say everything bad about you to everyone but you. And this one time, I was talking with a friend, and he said something racist. And now, I went to Hawaii when I was 15 years old, and I got the shit kicked out of me just because I was white, until I finally got in touch with some rage, and I studied martial arts, and then I used to beat the shit out of everybody that came near me. It was a great avenue for me to, it was like, if you didn't knock me out with the first punch, because I could never throw the first punch, I was a wimp. I couldn't, I wasn't the badass that could pick a fight, but if you didn't knock me out in the first punch, you were in a world of trouble. And so that was the home, man. I just lost it, going off into my little drama there. Oh shit, where was I? Racism. Yeah, racism. I don't like racist remarks. This guy said something racist, and I remember wanting to go, I gotta turn around, and it's like, yeah. I couldn't turn around. It was like my feet were glued to the floor. So I kind of looked down for a second, and I said, "Excuse me. When you say and do things like that, I get really uncomfortable. Would you not do that anymore?" And he looked at me and said, "Okay." And I was like, shit, I should have started that a long time ago. So something else happened like that. And I have friends in the gay and lesbian community. I could give a shit what you do sexually. Get all kinky. I don't care. I've seen all kinds of shit when I was out there, man. And so sexual preference is not an issue with me. People are people, And so this one guy said something homophobic one day, and I just said, I knew I could do this now. So I said, excuse me, when you say and do things like that, I get really uncomfortable. Would you please not do that? You know what he did? He looked at me and said, fuck you. Everything came to a full stop. And I looked at him, and it was like, boy, I was really glad. The magic of the program is we get choice. If you work through your shit, you don't lose it. So, or you may your feelings may come up, but you can control your behavior. And so what happened is I looked at him, and it was just like, I was standing in a crossroad right about then. And I looked at him and I said, okay, if that's the way you want to be, because I'll tell you something, I learned something. You better walk a mile in somebody's shoes before you make some kind of character statement, no matter what they say or do, because you don't know what shaped their lives, what influences they had. People are taught that kind of stuff. And so, no, I don't condone it, and I will address it, but I'm not going to hate somebody because we think differently. And so what happened is I looked at him and I said, if that's the way you're going to be, you go ahead, but I want no part of it, and I'm going to walk away if I hear you talk like that. You got your place here just like me, but if that's the way you're going to be, I'll see you later. And I turned around and walked away. And the magic of that was the next time I saw him, I didn't badmouth him. I didn't hate him. I didn't want to rip his head off and say, what a racist asshole or sexist prick or whatever. You know what I mean? It was a done issue. And that was great because, I was the kind of person, I milked a resentment. You know what I mean? In the old days, yeah. But those were some of the leaps of just me being able to be true to myself. And I'm telling you, man, it was gratifying because then it's a done issue. And then it's like life moves on, and that's what growth is about. I'm present. I have choice, and that's great. So I've been working with that for a while, just staying current with stuff. And in the 11th step, I learned about prayer and meditation, because I'll tell you something, by the time I got to the 11th step, I had a concept of a higher power, and it was about love. And my higher power is not out there trying to get in. It is in here trying to get out. I think behind my thoughts and feelings is the spark of who I really am. And its goal is for me to open my mind as far as it'll go, to open my heart past all the fear and pain, and let that spark out. And its goal is to reach out past your thoughts and feelings and touch that spark in you. And when that happens, unconditional love is experienced. And when that happens, it heals all the wounds that brought us into these rooms and gives us a level of understanding and wisdom that is far beyond the normal. We are exceptional people, whether you believe it or not. It's just a matter of, time and willingness and growth. And so I'm on that path. And I had one lesson in the 11th step. I started to do meditation, and meditation was very difficult for me. Very difficult to sit and just let go and be quiet in your dreams. I don't know how it is for you. I went to a meditation class, and this guy said, all right, everybody take 5 seconds and listen to the voice in your head. And after the 5 seconds was up, he said, the voice probably said, what voice? There's no voice in here. I don't hear anything. I got a yacker analyzing everything that's going on. Always checking what's the scoop here, man? And where's mine, And so I had to learn how to breathe and learn how to let go and just be present and expect nothing. And my meditation became, my sponsor said, pick your favorite spot. Mine is the beach. I'm a beach bum. I love the ocean. It has some kind of magnetic quality for me. So I go down there and I can feel the breeze. And so I had to learn how to sit for 10 minutes, stretch for 10 minutes, because I was one of those people I could never get comfortable. So, back in the 60s and 70s, I was into martial arts and yoga and all this shit. And my sponsor says, okay, do some stretching and then sit and breathe for 10 minutes and just see what happens. So I'd sit and I'd breathe and stretch and then breathe and then see what happened. And some days, nothing happened. Some days it felt like, you're looking really stupid out there. And some days my head would yell at me. Some days I felt nothing. Some days I felt like I heard music far away. Some days I felt like somebody was talking to me just beyond my hearing range. I felt movement inside of me, something was going on. And other days I felt really calm and peaceful. And magic things would happen. Like I would take that into a meeting, and it's like sometimes it was magic. I could look at somebody and just read them and know exactly what's going on with somebody. It improved my intuitive skills. It gave me a clarity that was uncommon. And more important, it gave me courage to approach people I would ordinarily not approach, and with real love and real genuine caring and concern, and none of this pretentious shit. I was able to approach people genuinely, and people know when you're real. We got bullshit detectors, I'm telling you. And it was a quality of reality that I had never knew was possible inside of me. And these things started to happen. And one day I was doing it, and I was not doing very well with it. And my head was yelling at me, and it was one of those days where somebody told me once there are 3 rules to be an addict. Number 1, you must be oversensitive. Number 2, you must take everything personal. Number 3, you must take it personal to an extreme. When in doubt, attack first. And it was one of those days I woke up, I was real vulnerable, and it was just like everything was making me jump and go, what? I was just like really uptight. And I was in my car, and it's funny, when you have days like that, it's like everybody knows. And they pull in front of you, and they stop, no turn signals, and I'm hanging my head out the window, letting them know, and I'm on the way across LA to see my client, and I get to the address, and there's this little old lady in front of the only parking spot on the street, and I drive by, and I'm looking at her, is that your parking place? And she's going, no. And so I roar in there, and I park, and I slam it. She's like 80 years old, and she's got those glasses that make her eyes look really big, and she's really frail and really really kind of frail looking, fragile. And I slam the door, and she flinches, and I go to the other side of my car, and I open the trunk, and she flinches, and then I get my stuff, I slam the trunk, she jumps again, and I look, and I know I have to walk right by her. And my head says, do not go by her, and go, hey! Just to watch her jump. I'm a little brat, there's like this little kid in me that is like totally mischievous. And so I get by her, and I'm walking, I got my gear, and I walk by, and all of a sudden I get right even with her, and I look over, and all of a sudden I see all this fear in this little lady's eyes. And all of a sudden my little world came to a stop, and I just went, oh shit, I knew I was responsible for the fear in this lady's eyes. And so I stopped, and I said something really stupid like, hey there, sweetie, how you doing? And she looked at me, and she goes, well, I'm fine, but how are you? And I said, I'm having a really rough day. Look, I'm really sorry if I frightened you. I was out of line. I'm having a rough day. Sorry about that. Hope you have a nice day. And she looked at me, and she goes, well, don't you worry, honey. Those feelings come and go. And it's like, I just thought it was hokey, dope fiend being kind to little old ladies on the side of the road. But, that was kind of magic, because my sponsor said something like that to me once, because, I was learning how to deal with feelings. I went to him one day, and I said, I feel like shit, and I want to die. He goes, well, enjoy it while it's there. It ain't going to last. I was like, well, thanks. And I went to a meeting and talked shit about him, woke up the next morning, felt great. Called him back and said, man, you're right. I feel great. Life is good. And he goes, enjoy it while it's there. It ain't going to last. Feelings come and go, whether they're comfortable or uncomfortable. It's really all about what I do with them. And if I'm true to myself, I let my feelings out in the right way, I'll move through anything with your help. And so I was learning a lot. Around that time, I started to think I was learning a lot. And I started bad-mouthing people because I thought I knew a lot. And I went to my sponsor once, bad-mouthing all these people. So he'd say things like, so Stephen, what is it about yourself you don't like today? Oh, it was really fucking annoying. And then I learned the word resentment. I have a resentment. It's like, I have resentment against so-and-so, I don't like how he talks. I have resentment against so-and-so, I don't like how she acts, blah, blah, blah. And so my sponsor looked at me and said, that's not resentment, Stephen. That's identification. I hated that. But it was true. It was like my emotional content, all my unexpressed stuff was leaping out and identifying with theirs. It was just a mirror effect. And the magic is, once I had done my work, I started to be able to deal with that in a way that was really healthy. I could see people that were real angry and really pissed off, and instead of saying, what's your problem? I could look over and say, I understand, behind all that anger is a lot of pain. And the only way to reach it is love and acceptance and understanding. And so it was like, man, these are big changes for me. And so my life really did change. I got into the 12th step, and I learned how to give, because that's why we're here. I think addicts are the most intelligent, sensitive, talented people that walk the face of the earth. And it's our duty, our challenge, our path, our journey, whatever you want to call it, it's our challenge to find what our talent is. And even if it's taking the sum total of all your experience and gaining a huge understanding, then that's your talent, that's your gift. You have something that will save one person that nobody else can give them. It's like each one of us has something special. And that's what I'm here to find. And I see it through you guys. There's a lot of power of example, and it's like exceptional. And so that's what's going on with that. And I have a couple of experiences, and I'll tell you what's happening now, and I'll shut up. I have lost track of time. Are we out of time, or what? Are we all right? Okay. Anyway, okay, I had a couple of stories. Big deal in my life. I got my first job in recovery. I was about a year clean, and somehow one of the veils in my life was lifted for no apparent reason. I didn't work any steps or anything. I was just still a fucking lunatic. I hear about all these pink clouds. That was non-existent. Good for you, man. My first year was miserable. I was miserable my first year because I never did anything anybody said. It's like, duh. And so I got a job, and the big deal was I decided to do something I liked. Well, the only thing I liked to do was go to the beach. So you know what I did? I went to the YMCA and got certified and became a lifeguard. Got a water safety instructor, a WSI certificate. And so I taught swimming and I taught lifeguards how to do their job. And I got happy for a while. It was great. And I ran this little pool on the windward side of Oahu. And am I scaring you all away? And I got this job there, and I had my own little office, and I was teaching swimming and all this shit, and I had my charts, and I went in my little cubbyhole office feeling very important one morning, and this girl who cleans the pools came into my office and began to yell at me with a mouth like this far from the back of my head, about stuff that had nothing to do with me. And I'll tell you something, there's nothing worse than an addict with justified anger. And the hackles went up on my neck, and she's just bellowing at me, yelling and bellowing, yeah. And I turn around, and my ears popped, everything got in slow motion, and I turn around, and she's going, and my head says, is this where I hit her? And it's like, because she was like, you know, like that. I don't hit women. I don't do that. I don't go for that. And so my head says, tell her to go fuck herself, man. It ain't my problem. So I looked at her dead in the eye, got up right in her face and said, you're really upset, aren't you? She looked at me and says, well, yeah. And I said, you're really angry? And she goes, yeah. And I said, somebody hurt you? And she goes, yeah. And I said, it wasn't me, was it? And she goes, no. And I said, well, look, if somebody has hurt you, you come to me and talk to me about it, and I'll listen because I know what it's like to be in pain. And she looked at me. I got chills, man. I looked behind me to see who said that. I don't know where that came from. I call that an unexplained act of kindness. I had never met an attack with understanding or kindness, acceptance, and love. That was like a brand new experience for me. And that was just one of many. And my life is rich, man. I'm sweet. It's like my life is not good or bad. It's deep and it's rich, you know. My sponsor said one day, he goes, so what do you want in life, Stephen? And I looked at him and I said, I want love, respect, and understanding. He said, good. Reach inside yourself, pull it out, and give it to somebody else. That's how you get it. And it was like, whoa. So that was like a reality check. I have to be willing to initiate what I want, and because any kind of complaining and whining after that, it's like, you know, I have no right to complain about it if I'm not willing to give it. And so it began to change my life, you know. I have become not as afraid to approach and initiate things as I used to be. You know what I mean? It's not always smooth. It's not you know, don't let me fool you up here. I have not got it together by any means. You know, I understand a few things. That has given me a certain amount of freedom. I don't have the need to be right or wrong about anything. I don't have to be right. I just have to understand. And that has given me a lot of freedom. And I'm willing to grow all the time, every single day. I hear something that teaches me something. And it's just a good thing to be open like that. I'm not open every minute of the day, every day. I have my self-centered moments. I'm still on the path, you know. But it's good. It's sweet. A couple of years ago, somebody said, so Stephen, when are you going to find your other half? Because I was single forever. I'd never been married, never had any kids, never been in a lasting relationship. Longest relationship for me was 2 months, and man, that was long. And so I looked at him and I said, I'm not looking for another half. I want to be a whole person and then attract another whole person. You know, it was about me doing all my work, getting out of the way, getting all my debris out of the way so I don't have any conflicts, you know, or I'm able to deal with conflicts in a healthy way. Say, okay, this is my stuff, this may be your stuff, you know. But learn how to have healthy boundaries so that I can deal with stuff. And you know something, I must have done something right because I wasn't even looking and I found this lady. I was not even looking. And it was just like the natural course of events. We just ended up walking down the same path together. She's a wonderful human being. She has balance, power, strength, sensitivity, intelligence. She is like an amazing woman. And another amazing thing happened. She got pregnant, and I have now become a dad. I'm 49 years old, and my little boy is 4 years old now. Hope it doesn't give him some complex. He's got an old man for a dad. But I have 2 other kids from Elizabeth's first marriage, and that's been a whole learning experience, learning how to be a stepfather. That was not an easy process, I'll tell you. But I'll tell you something. 5 years ago, we were living together. I was making $7 an hour raking leaves. She was making about the same, picking up trash at Shaw's Supermarket in this little town in Bath where we live. And then we started a business 3 years ago, and our first annual income was about 60 grand. And last year was 90 grand. This year was 170 grand. And it's like we bought a big house. I'm a homeowner. Shit. You know, got 2 cars. We're putting a swimming pool in this week and a hot tub. And I mean, it's like good things have come our way. You know, and we're talking about people who, I came from the gutter. I was a street hype, dope fiend. And it's like, these are nice things, but we know we can live without all of it, you know, but it's nice to have it. Do you agree? You know, I mean, hey. So it's sweet, you know. Things are just so good. It's like, you know, it's a challenge. I've had interesting challenges in our relationship and with myself. My relationship's so healthy, I can see the areas where I'm unwilling to get vulnerable. It's like, you know, I'm around a woman that has a capacity for great love, and it makes me aware of where it's not in me. And so it has motivated me, and that's where I'm working the steps all about that intimacy and vulnerability and what I do to avoid, you know, all of that stuff. And the result is we have a very healthy relationship. We're happy. And I got to tell you, I'm at peace. This is a good thing. My life is rich. It's sweet. And it's all a result of coming here, working the steps, working the principles. I've been involved with service all the way to the world level and back. And right now, my life is so full. The best I can do is I have a home group. I'm in service at my home group. I'm only able to get to a couple meetings a week. And down the road, I'll get back and involved with service a little more in depth. But I got to tell you, you know, it's been real sweet being here and real nice, you know, talking to you folks. I hope one person in this room has learned something tonight. And if you have and I have, thank you all. And I got to tell you, you know, be true to yourself. There's help and there's hope and there's a way through all of it. Thank you.